Hello, gentle listener. Welcome to Pets for Sleep. Whether you have joined us before or are discovering this calm corner for the first time, this is a place to slow down, learn something gentle about the animals we care for, and let the day begin to soften around you. Tonight, we are beginning with one of the most familiar parts of a cat's face. A set of long, curved hairs reaches outward from the muzzle, above the eyes, along the cheeks, and even near the front legs. They look light and simple. They may rest against a cushion, brush the rim of a box, or shift forward when a cat studies something close. Yet these hairs are part of a sensory system that helps a cat notice the narrow space just beyond its skin. The scientific name for whiskers is vibrissae. That word comes from a root connected with vibration, which suits them well, because even a small movement can matter. Whiskers are found in many mammals, from mice and shrews to dogs, seals, and domestic cats. Their exact shape and use differ from one species to another, but they share a broad purpose. They gather mechanical information from nearby objects, surfaces, and movement. A cat does not have to press its whole face against a chair leg to know that the chair leg is there. One long whisker may meet the wood first. That early contact can arrive while the nose, eyelids, cheeks, and front paws are still a short distance away. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through the lives of animals, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels natural, to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight, or which pet is nearby as you listen. It helps other animal lovers find their way to this calm corner of the world, one sleepy companion at a time. A whisker extending over the edge of a blanket may appear almost motionless. A closer look shows that it is always part of a changing arrangement. When the cat turns its head, the angle of the whisker changes. When the cat lowers its muzzle toward a toy, the longer hairs reach the object before much of the face does. When the cat settles into rest, the whiskers often return to a looser position beside the cheeks. This makes them useful for more than one kind of moment. They can help during movement through a narrow opening. They can add touch information when an object is very close to the nose. They can respond during play, hunting, grooming, climbing, or simple exploration around a room. Their value does not disappear when the light grows dim, because whiskers begin with physical movement, rather than with light entering the eyes. That does not mean they let a cat see in darkness. Touch and vision are different senses, and each gives the brain a different kind of information. A whisker can report that something has moved against it, where the contact began, and how that contact changes as the head keeps moving. The eyes can watch a toy from across the room. The ears can follow the faint scrape of it along the floor. The nose can detect its smell. Then, when the toy reaches the final space beneath the muzzle, the whiskers can join the same event through touch. This is why the hairs around a cat's face should not be treated as decoration. They are arranged parts of the animal's body, connected to deeper structures under the skin and to nerve pathways, carrying information toward the brain. The visible strand is only the outer part. Its real importance depends on what happens at the buried base. That hidden structure is easy to miss because the cat's cheek looks soft and ordinary from the outside. Beneath it, each major whisker sits in a specialized follicle, built to respond when the shaft bends. the whisker itself reaches into the room. The living sensor remains protected inside the face. So the first mystery is smaller and more precise than it may seem. The question is not simply why cats have long hairs. It is how a strand outside the body can move information into the body at all. A single whisker can be followed from its narrow tip back toward the cat's cheek. Near the outer end, it may be so fine that it almost disappears against a pale wall or a dark blanket. Closer to the face, the shaft becomes thicker and stronger. Its natural curve is present even before it touches anything. Some whiskers sweep outward in a broad arc, while others bend more gently. The exact shape varies from one whisker to another, even on the same cat. That shape matters because the visible strand is built to carry force. The part extending beyond the skin is made mainly from keratin. Keratin is a tough protein also found in ordinary hair and claws. Once the whisker shaft has grown out of the follicle, the exposed material is no longer living tissue. There are no nerve endings running through its length. A pair of scissors cutting across the shaft would pass through keratin rather than through a nerve. That does not make trimming harmless to the sensory system, because shortening the shaft changes how it moves and how far it can reach. The important point here is more basic. Sensation begins beneath the skin. The whisker outside the face serves as a mechanical link between an object and the sensitive tissues at its base. Engineers use the word cantilever for a structure held firmly at one end, while the other end remains free to bend. A diving board is a familiar example. One end is fixed to the platform, and the outer end moves under weight. A whisker follows the same broad physical rule on a much smaller scale. Its base is anchored inside the cheek. The long outer portion can flex when it meets the rim of a box, a blade of grass, or the edge of a food dish. As the free end moves, the forces created by that movement travel back toward the fixed end. Touching the fine tip produces a different effect from pressing close to the base. A light contact far from the face gains leverage because it acts across a longer length of shaft. Pressure near the cheek has less distance over which to bend the whisker. The direction of contact also changes the result. An object moving from the front can push the shaft backward. A surface beside the cat may bend it inward toward the cheek. Contact from below can lift the whisker and twist it along a different path. Each movement creates its own combination of bending and turning at the buried base. Scientists often describe these effects as forces and moments. A force is a push or pull. A moment is the turning effect produced when that push acts at some distance from the anchored point. A door offers an easy way to picture the difference. Pushing near the hinges produces little movement. The same push near the handle turns the door more easily because it acts farther from the hinge. A whisker uses similar mechanics. Length changes the amount of leverage. Thickness affects stiffness. Taper influences how the shaft bends along its length. Curvature changes the direction in which contact forces travel. Mathematical models can predict many of these patterns without placing a sensor anywhere along the exposed whisker. Artificial whiskers have also been built from flexible plastic, metal, or other materials. Sensors placed only at the base can detect where the shaft was pushed, how strongly it bent, and how the contact changed over time. This confirms an elegant feature of the biological design. The vulnerable sensing tissue remains protected inside the body, while the replaceable keratin shaft reaches into the outside world. Even a small collision can send vibrations along that shaft. A whisker brushing rough fabric may vibrate differently from one sliding along smooth glass. Fast contact creates a different pattern from slow, steady pressure. The shaft gathers these mechanical details through its shape and movement before the nervous system begins interpreting them. Nothing along the exposed strand needs to think, feel, or generate a signal. Its job is physical. It bends according to the object it meets and carries the consequences of that contact toward the cheek. At the skin, the whisker disappears into a structure far more complex than the simple hair visible from outside. Blood-filled spaces, connective tissue, and sensory endings surround the buried portion. Those hidden parts are positioned to read movements that may begin with the faintest touch at the tip. Beneath the surface, the whisker continues far deeper than an ordinary coat hair. Its buried portion enters a narrow capsule surrounded by living tissue. This structure is called a follicle sinus complex. The name sounds technical, but it describes something simple enough to picture. A follicle holds the whisker in place, while the sinus refers to blood-filled spaces arranged around part of its base. Together, they form a specialized sensory organ hidden inside the cheek. The root of a normal coat hair is comparatively small. A major facial whisker sits within a larger, deeper structure, supplied by many sensory nerve fibers. The outer wall is made from layers of connective tissue. Connective tissue is the strong, flexible material that supports and joins parts of the body. Inside that wall, the whisker passes through several distinct regions. Near the lower part of the follicle is an area called the cavernous sinus. This name comes from the open, chamber-like spaces around the buried shaft. Farther upward sits another blood-filled region known as the ring sinus. It forms a circular space around the whisker, closer to the skin. The blood in these chambers does more than supply the living tissue. It also helps create a supported mechanical environment around the shaft. When the whisker bends outside the face, the section inside the follicle shifts against the nearby tissue. Pressure changes within the capsule. Connective layers stretch in some places and compress in others. A light touch at the tip can therefore produce a small but organized change deep beneath the skin. Several kinds of sensory endings are positioned around this moving structure. Some are linked with Merkel cells. These cells help detect steady pressure and the continued position of a surface against the body. They are useful when a whisker remains bent for more than a brief instant. Other nerve endings form long shapes beside the follicle. These are often called lanceolate endings because their arrangement resembles narrow pointed leaves. They respond especially well when the whisker begins moving or changes direction. Reticular endings form tighter, branching networks. The word reticular means net-like. These endings occupy particular zones around the follicle, where they can respond to deformation passing through the surrounding tissue. Each receptor does not need to measure every part of the movement. Their different positions allow the nervous system to collect several pieces of the same event. One group may respond strongly when contact begins. Another may continue sending activity while the whisker stays displaced. Receptors on one side of the follicle can experience more pressure than those on the opposite side when the shaft bends in a certain direction. This organization makes the follicle more like a layered measuring instrument than a simple hole holding a hair. A three-dimensional study published in 2002 examined the nerve supply inside cat and rat whisker follicles. The general design was recognizable in both animals, but the detailed arrangement was different. In cats, some nerve fibers linked with Merkel cells gathered into several large clusters. The reticular endings occupied tighter territories and followed different directions from those seen in rats. Those differences matter because the two animals do not use their whiskers in exactly the same way. Rats often sweep their facial whiskers back and forth in repeated rhythmic movements. Cats can move and reposition their whiskers, though their usual pattern is less regular and less continuous. The sensory organ reflects those different ways of gathering information. From the outside, the cheek still appears covered by ordinary fur. A resting cat may show no sign of the blood chambers, connective layers, receptor clusters, and nerve fibers working beneath that surface. The visible whisker can remain almost weightless against a cushion, while its buried base sits inside one of the most densely equipped hair follicles in the mammalian body. Movement at the tip travels inward as a change in force. The capsule shapes that force through its tissues. Sensory endings receive the resulting pressure and stretch. At that point, the event is still mechanical. The tissues have shifted, but the information has not yet become the electrical activity that can travel toward the brain. That change begins at the receptor membrane, where pressure against living cells opens the path from physical movement into a nerve signal. The edge of the cushion presses lightly against the whisker's fine outer tip. That contact bends the shaft by only a small amount, yet the movement travels along its full length. Near the cheek, the thicker base resists the motion more strongly. Inside the follicle, the buried portion tilts and pushes against the tissue surrounding it. The shaft does not slide freely through an empty tube. Connective fibers hold it within a layered capsule, so movement in one direction creates a pattern of stretching and compression around the base. Tissue on one side may be pressed inward. The opposite side may be pulled slightly outward. Blood-filled spaces inside the follicle also change shape as force passes through them. These small mechanical changes reach the sensory endings arranged around the whisker. Each ending belongs to a nerve cell with a membrane that can respond to pressure. A cell membrane is the thin boundary surrounding a living cell. Within that boundary are tiny protein channels that can open when the nearby tissue bends or stretches. Once those channels open, electrically charged particles move across the membrane. This changes the electrical state of the nerve ending. If the change becomes strong enough, the nerve begins sending brief electrical pulses toward the brain. The process of turning a physical event into nerve activity is called sensory transduction. In simpler terms, pressure becomes a signal the nervous system can carry. The pattern begins changing from the instant the whisker meets the cushion. Some sensory fibers respond most strongly at the beginning of movement. Their activity may rise quickly when the shaft starts bending, then fall as the whisker settles into a steady position. These are known as rapidly adapting fibers because their strongest response is tied to change. They are especially useful for detecting motion, sudden contact, and vibration. Studies of cat sinus hairs have found more than one rapidly adapting group. Some responded only when the hair moved above a relatively high speed. Others reacted to slower movement. This gives the sensory system several thresholds rather than one simple switch. A whisker sliding slowly along fabric can therefore produce a different pattern from a quick tap against cardboard. Other fibers continue sending pulses, while the whisker remains bent. These are called slowly adapting fibers. Their steady activity preserves information about ongoing pressure or position. If a cat keeps its cheek close to the side of a box, these receptors can continue reporting that the shaft is still displaced. The nervous system receives both the beginning of contact and the fact that contact remains. Direction also changes the pattern. A whisker pushed backward deforms one region of the follicle more strongly. An upward bend shifts pressure toward another set of tissues. Receptors arranged around the capsule can respond differently depending on which side is compressed. This allows one movement to carry information about where the force came from. Vibration adds another layer. A collision that lasts only a fraction of a second can make the shaft tremble at several frequencies at once. A mechanics study, published in 2023, found that small whisker collisions could produce vibration modes reaching approximately 10 kHz. 10 kHz means 10,000 cycles in 1 second. The cat does not need to experience each cycle as a separate event. The rapid vibration changes the pattern, arriving at movement-sensitive receptors near the base. Smooth glass, rough cloth, and a hard plastic edge can all shape those vibrations differently because their surfaces resist and release the whisker in different ways. Computer models suggest that the buried shaft may bend into a shallow S-shaped curve inside the follicle. The exact form depends partly on tissue stiffness and pressure within the blood sinus. A firmer support would transfer force differently from a softer one. Measuring these changes inside a living, intact follicle remains difficult, so some details still come from models and carefully prepared tissue. The broader mechanism is well supported. A touch creates force. The follicle reshapes that force. Mechanically sensitive endings divided into patterns of timing, speed, direction, and duration. By the time the signal leaves the whisker's base, it already contains far more detail than a simple message that something was nearby. Across the muzzle, many other follicles are ready to do the same work from slightly different positions. Viewed from outside the cheek, those separate follicles form a carefully ordered field. The main facial whiskers grow from 2 raised pads beside the nose. These are called mystacial whiskers, using a name linked to the moustache-like area of the face. A typical domestic cat is often described as having about 12 prominent mystacial whiskers on each side. They are commonly arranged through 4 main rows, although the exact count and spacing vary from one cat to another. A missing whisker, an extra short shaft, or a slightly uneven row can all fall within normal individual variation. Near the nose, several whiskers are shorter and remain close to the muzzle. Farther back, longer shafts reach around the sides of the head. Some sweep outward in broad curves. Others point more forward or rest closer to the cheek. Each one begins from its own position beneath the skin, so every shaft samples a slightly different part of nearby space. The differences extend beyond length. One whisker may have a thicker base and resist bending more strongly, A finer shaft may respond more easily to light contact. Natural curvature changes the direction in which each whisker first approaches an object. Its resting angle also affects which surface it is likely to meet as the cat moves. Together, these variations create an array with overlapping ranges. A cardboard box makes the pattern easy to picture. As a cat moves its head beside one outer wall, the longest whisker may touch first. A second shaft bends a moment later as the cheek draws closer. Shorter whiskers near the nose may remain untouched until the cat turns toward the corner. The order changes when the head moves in a different direction. A forward approach produces one sequence of contacts. A sideways turn creates another. Tilting the muzzle downward brings a different part of the array toward the surface. The nervous system can compare these changing signals. One follicle may begin firing while nearby follicles remain still. Several may then respond together as more of the array meets the object. If the head continues moving, pressure may increase on one side while falling away on another. This creates information across both space and time. Space tells the nervous system which parts of the array were disturbed. Time shows the order in which those disturbances occurred and how long each contact lasted. The result does not resemble a photograph appearing inside the cat's head. Whiskers supply a moving pattern of touch. That pattern becomes useful when it is combined with the cat's own movement. A single bend could come from many possible objects. Several contacts arriving in a known sequence give the brain more structure to work with. The head turns by a small amount. The whiskers meet the surface from a new angle, and the pattern changes again. Repeated movement can gradually reveal an edge, a curve, or the opening beside an obstacle. Engineers building artificial whisker arrays use the same broad principle. One flexible rod can report a local contact. Several rods placed at different angles allow a machine to compare where contact began and how it spread through the array. The useful information comes from the relationship among sensors as the body moves. This ordered arrangement is found far beyond domestic cats. Mice, rats, shrews, dogs, and many other land mammals carry facial whiskers in organized groups, rather than as a random scattering of long hairs. The number, size, and movement pattern differ among species. Even so, graded lengths and repeated rows appear again and again. That shared layout suggests that natural selection preserved an effective way to gather close-range touch information around the head. On a cat, the two sides also work within a balanced facial system. An object brushing the left array creates a different distribution from one approaching the right cheek. A narrow opening may contact both sides as the head enters. Uneven contact can help guide a turn or encourage the cat to adjust its angle. Vision and memory contribute to the same movement, while the whisker field adds immediate physical information from the nearest surfaces. The familiar lines beside the nose therefore form a sensory arrangement with reach, direction, and internal order. Each shaft contributes one local signal. The full array gains meaning from the way those signals overlap and change. Yet the muzzle carries only the most obvious group. Long tactile hairs also rise above the eyes, extend from the cheeks, and appear near the front legs, placing smaller sensory fields wherever the cat's body is likely to meet the nearby world. Above each eye, a few long hairs rise from the brow and reach beyond the edge of the face. These are called supraorbital whiskers. The name simply means that they sit above the eye socket. Their position gives them a protective advantage. A blade of grass, the edge of a curtain, or a thin branch may touch one of these hairs before it reaches the eye itself. That early contact can help trigger a blink or a small turn of the head. The clear outer surface of the eye is called the cornea. It is delicate and highly sensitive, so even a brief warning from a hair placed above it can be useful. The whisker does not make the decision to blink. Its movement activates sensory pathways, and the nervous system can respond before the object presses directly against the eye. Farther back, smaller tactile hairs extend from the cheek. These are often called genal whiskers. The word genal refers to the cheek region. Their reach is shorter than that of the main muzzle array, yet their position gives them access to surfaces approaching from the side. A cat moving close to a wall, squeezing past furniture, or turning its head inside a box may bring these hairs into contact after the longest muzzle whiskers have already begun to bend. The contact pattern shifts as the cheek approaches. That gives the nervous system another layer of information about distance and angle. Under the jaw are lower facial whiskers, sometimes described as mandibular whiskers, because they grow near the mandible, or lower jaw. These hairs sit beneath the muzzle, where the eyes cannot easily watch every close surface. A cat lowering its head toward food, a toy, or the floor may bring the underside of the face near an object before the chin touches it. The lower whiskers can add contact information from that hidden zone. Their exact role has received less direct study than the large whiskers beside the nose, so it is best to describe them as part of a wider touch system, rather than assign them one single task. The same caution applies to a group found much farther from the face. Near the wrist area of each front leg are carpal whiskers. Carpal refers to the small bones around the wrist. These hairs grow from specialized follicles and connect with sensory nerves, much like the facial whiskers. Their location places them close to surfaces passing beneath the front legs and to objects held near the paws. A toy caught between the forelegs may brush them. The edge of a step can move past them as the cat reaches downward. During grooming, climbing, or close handling of an object, they may provide extra touch information from a part of the body already busy with movement. Their presence is well established. Their full contribution to feline behavior remains less clear. Studies of cat sinus hairs have shown that receptors around these leg whiskers can respond to movement, direction, and pressure. That supports a real sensory function. It does not prove that carpal whiskers exist only for catching prey or judging a landing. The front legs already receive information from skin, joints, claws, and muscles. Carpal whiskers add one more stream to that larger system. This pattern appears across mammals in many forms. Most species concentrate their longest tactile hairs around the face, where the head first meets nearby objects. Some carry vibrissae on other parts of the body. Hyraxes provide one of the clearest examples. These sturdy, rabbit-sized mammals live in Africa and the Middle East, and are more closely related to elephants than their appearance might suggest. True tactile hairs are spread across much of a hyrax's body. Those hairs may help the animal feel nearby rock surfaces while moving through narrow cracks and dark shelters. Cats use a more limited arrangement. with the strongest concentration around the head and smaller groups at selected points. The shared principle is placement. Tactile hairs tend to appear where an extended contact point can provide useful warning or extra feedback. Above the eye, they help guard a delicate surface. Along the cheek, they meet objects approaching from the side. Near the foreleg, they monitor a region close to the paws. Each group adds information from a different edge of the body. Their value grows when the animal can change the direction in which the hairs face. Around the muzzle, small facial muscles allow the cat to spread, draw back, and angle the main whisker field as attention and movement change. Those small muscles are already active when a resting cat's whiskers lie in loose curves beside the cheeks. The shafts may look still, yet their position reflects a quiet balance between muscle tone, head posture, and the weight of each whisker. A cat settled on a sofa often holds the main muzzle array slightly outward and to the sides. The arrangement changes when something enters close range. A fingertip approaching the nose may draw several whiskers forward. A feather toy moving across the floor can make the array spread toward the direction of interest. Even an unfamiliar object placed nearby may cause the whisker pads to shift before the cat leans in to inspect it. The movement begins within the face. Each major whisker sits inside its own follicle, and the follicles are connected by small bands of muscle called intrinsic muscles. Intrinsic simply means that the muscles belong closely to the whisker pad itself. These short muscles link nearby follicles and help draw parts of the array forward. Larger muscles around the muzzle are called extrinsic muscles. They connect the whisker pad with broader regions of the face and can reposition a larger area at once. Together, these muscle groups alter the angle, spread, and reach of the whiskers. Moving the array changes which shaft is most likely to touch an object first. A whisker directed forward can meet a toy sooner than one resting along the cheek. Spreading the rows increases the area sampled around the nose. Drawing the whiskers closer to the face changes their exposure during movement through a tight space. The sensory system therefore begins shaping contact before contact happens. This connection between movement and touch is known as a sensory motor loop. Sensory refers to receiving information. Motor refers to producing movement. A cat angles the whiskers toward an object, receives signals when the shafts bend, and then adjusts the head or body. That adjustment changes the next contact. The process can repeat several times during one brief inspection. A cat examining the corner of a box may move its nose forward by a few centimeters. The longest whiskers touch first. The head turns slightly, changing the angle of the shafts against the cardboard. New pressure patterns then reach different follicles. Each small movement alters what the array can report. Rodents use the same broad connection between movement and sensation, though many species employ it with a much faster rhythm. Rats and mice often sweep their facial whiskers forward and backward in repeated cycles. This behavior is called whisking. Depending on the species and activity, the movement can occur at roughly 5 to 25 cycles each second. A cycle is one forward and backward sweep. During active exploration, a rat may send its whiskers across a surface again and again, while its nose remains close behind. High-speed recordings show the rows changing angle in regular coordination, as the animal examines walls, gaps, or objects. Cats follow a different movement pattern. Their whiskers clearly protract, meaning they move forward, and retract, meaning they move back toward the cheeks. They can also spread the array or hold it in a more compact position. Regular rapid whisking is not a typical feature of feline exploration. Comparative anatomical studies have linked this difference with variations in the muscles and nerve endings around cat and rat follicles. Both animals possess movable sensory hairs, while their everyday motor strategies reflect different bodies and behaviors. A rat often gathers touch through repeated sweeping. A cat more often changes the position of the array in relation to attention, head movement, and close contact. The distinction helps explain why a cat's whiskers may appear calm for several seconds, and then shift together when interest sharpens. Their movement is part of active sensing, even without a rapid rhythm. The face prepares the array for what the cat is doing. During relaxed rest, the whiskers may remain loosely spread. Close investigation can bring them farther forward. A defensive or uncomfortable posture may draw them nearer the cheeks, though their meaning must always be read with the ears, eyes, tail, and the rest of the body. For sensory work, the key result is physical. Each new angle changes the path between an object and the follicle beneath the skin. That control becomes especially useful during the final approach to something beneath the muzzle. At that distance, the bridge of the nose and the shape of the face begin to block part of the view, while the whiskers are already positioned to make contact. A toy can remain easy to watch while it moves several feet across the floor. The cat's eyes track its path, especially when the object changes speed or direction. As the cat lowers its head and moves closer, the view begins to change. The bridge of the nose and the shape of the muzzle partly block the space directly beneath the face. An object that was clearly visible a moment earlier can slip into a narrow zone where fine visual detail becomes harder to hold. Cats are well suited to detecting movement. Their eyes also perform strongly in dim light compared with human eyes. A reflective layer behind the retina, called the tapetum lucidum, sends some light through the light-sensitive cells a second time. This improves the chance of detecting a faint scene when illumination is low. It also helps create the familiar eye shine seen when light catches a cat's eyes at night. Strong low-light vision still has limits. Close focus is one of them. Veterinary descriptions commonly note that cats have difficulty seeing sharp detail at very short distances, especially directly beneath the nose. The exact boundary varies with the object, lighting, head angle, and individual cat. The practical effect is easy to observe. A small treat held too close may lead the cat to sniff, turn its head, or search with the mouth rather than stare directly at it. A toy sliding under the chin can disappear from the most useful part of the visual field. The whiskers enter the same space from several directions. A long shaft beside the nose may touch the toy before the lips or cheek reach it. Lower facial whiskers can meet an object beneath the jaw. The contact adds immediate information about where the surface is and how it moves as the cat shifts position. Several other senses remain active during the same moment. Smell can identify food or a familiar object through molecules entering the nose. Hearing can follow a faint scrape, rattle, or rustle. The paws receive pressure through the skin and joints when they land beside the target. Past experience also matters. A cat that has explored the same box many times already knows something about its opening, depth, and position in the room. Each source of information has its own useful range. Vision works before physical contact and is especially effective for following movement across open space. Hearing can detect an event hidden behind furniture or outside the field of view. Smell can remain after the object has moved away. Whiskers become most informative when a surface enters the near field, meaning the small region close enough for direct mechanical contact. Their signal has a different form from an image. A whisker can bend backward, upward, or sideways. The amount of bending can rise as the cat moves closer. A second whisker may touch a fraction of a second later. These patterns describe contact through pressure and timing. The eyes describe light, shape, motion, and contrast. The brain combines both streams with the position of the head and the movement of the body. Lower light changes the balance among those streams. As a room grows dim, fewer photons reach the retina. A photon is a tiny packet of light. The eye needs enough of them to build useful visual information. Whisker contact follows the same mechanical rules in bright sunlight and near darkness. Cardboard bends a shaft regardless of whether the cat can see the cardboard clearly. The rim of a box still presses against the array. A curtain still brushes the hairs above the eye. The physical event remains available to the nervous system. This steady function helps explain why whiskers fit so well with feline activity around dusk, at night, and inside sheltered spaces. They support the senses that continue working when visual detail becomes weaker. They also remain useful in full daylight because close objects can still fall beneath the muzzle. Calling whiskers a way of seeing in darkness would blur two very different processes. Light forms patterns across the retina. Touch begins when matter moves a shaft and deforms a follicle. The cat gains a layered sensory picture from their cooperation. An object can first appear at a distance, then make a sound as it moves, carry a scent as the cat approaches, and finally bend the whiskers when it enters the last few centimeters around the face. That early contact gives the body time to respond before the obstacle reaches the nose or cheek. A whisker brushing a chair leg can influence a turn while the rest of the head is still moving forward. The cat continues forward along the side of a chair, with the longest whiskers reaching beyond the width of the muzzle. One shaft meets the wooden leg before the nose arrives. The contact bends the whisker backward and changes the pressure inside its follicle. A moment later, the cat slows slightly and turns its head by a few degrees. That small adjustment changes the path of the whole body. The shoulder passes farther from the chair. The front paw lands in a clearer space. The hindquarters follow the route already shaped by the head. This sequence matters because a walking animal cannot place every part of its body at the same time. The face usually leads. The whisker field extends beyond the face. The nose follows behind it. Then the front feet reach the ground farther back. Information gathered near the head can therefore arrive early enough to influence later movement. A cardboard tunnel gives the same process a more enclosed setting. As the cat approaches the opening, the whiskers spread ahead and to the sides. The longest shafts may touch both edges while the nose is still outside. If contact is stronger on the left, the cat can angle its head slightly to the right. a lower whisker may brush the floor, while one above the eye reaches toward the top of the opening. Each signal is local, yet together, they help guide the body through a narrow route. The whiskers do not need to measure the tunnel with perfect accuracy. Their main advantage is timing. They encounter nearby surfaces before the heavier parts of the body commit to the same path. High-speed cameras have shown this early sampling clearly in other small mammals. A study published in 2018 examined 59 animals from 11 small, non-flying mammal species. The researchers recorded movement from the side, sometimes at 500 frames each second. That speed allowed them to separate events that would blur together to the human eye. The species included animals with different body shapes and whisker habits, allowing the researchers to look for a shared pattern in locomotion. Across the animals studied, the nose and whisker field explored places before the front paws arrived there. The delay ranged from about 47 milliseconds to 367 milliseconds. A millisecond is 1,000th of a second. At the shorter end, the interval was less than 1/20th of a second. At the longer end, it was a little more than 1/3 of a second. Those brief intervals still gave the nervous system time to receive touch information and adjust movement. The front paws often landed close to places the nose had recently occupied. Measured distances ranged from about 4 to 25 millimeters. 4 millimeters is narrower than a small pea. 25 millimeters is roughly 2.5 centimeters. The pattern suggests that the whiskers and nose help sample the route before the feet place weight on it. Those exact measurements did not come from domestic cats. They came from 11 other small mammal species, so they should be used as comparative evidence rather than as direct feline data. The shared body plan remains useful. Cats also carry their whisker field ahead of the nose, and the head usually reaches a tight passage before the front paws do. The same physical advantage applies even when the timing differs by species. The cat's own movement also affects what the whiskers can detect. A slow step gives the shafts more time to bend gradually against the surface. A quicker turn produces a faster change at the follicle. Head angle determines which road touches first. Speed changes how rapidly the signal rises. The position of the paws then changes the route that follows. This creates a continuous exchange between sensation and motion. The cat moves forward. The whiskers encounter the edge. The nervous system alters the head or step before the rest of the body reaches the same place. That process can happen so smoothly that it looks effortless from across the room. A tiny bend beside the cheek can influence where several kilograms of animal move next. Solid contact explains the chair leg and tunnel wall. A whisker can also shift when no surface has reached it at all, because moving air can press against the shaft and make it bend. A faint current passes through the cardboard tunnel and lifts several whiskers by a barely visible amount. The longest shafts drift in the direction of the moving air, then settle into a new position. Some begin to tremble around that position as the flow changes from moment to moment. Air feels almost weightless against human skin, yet it still carries force. Every moving gas contains molecules striking the surfaces in its path. When those molecules meet a long, flexible whisker, their combined pressure can bend the shaft. The effect grows stronger as the air moves faster. Whisker shape matters as well. A long, narrow shaft offers more length for the flow to push against than a short, thick one. Its natural curve influences how the force travels toward the base. Several whiskers on the same face can therefore respond differently to one current, because each has its own length, thickness, and resting angle. Researchers tested these mechanics directly in a laboratory study published in 2016. They placed isolated rat whiskers in controlled streams of air and measured how the shafts moved. The whiskers bent mainly in the direction of the flow. They also oscillated, meaning they moved back and forth around a new average position. Greater airflow speed produced more bending. The response also increased when the whisker was long compared with the width of its base. That relationship makes physical sense. A long lever gives moving air more surface and more distance over which to create a turning force. Airflow presses along much of a whisker's exposed length. Engineers call this a distributed load because the force is spread across the structure. Contact with a solid edge usually creates a more local load. The rim of a box may press against one small point on the shaft. A draft can act across many points at once. Those two events produce different patterns of bending and vibration at the follicle. The nervous system may be able to distinguish some of those patterns. Evidence from rats shows that the mechanical movement can reach the nerves. A study published in 2019 found that airflow-driven whisker vibration activated primary trigeminal afferents. Primary afferents are the sensory nerve fibers carrying the first signal away from the whisker follicle. The trigeminal system handles much of the touch information from the face. When air made the whiskers move, those fibers changed their electrical activity. Behavioral experiments with rats have also shown that whiskers can help the animals turn toward an airflow source. This ability could be useful near a burrow entrance, a narrow passage, or any place where moving air carries information about an opening. The evidence becomes less complete when attention returns to domestic cats. A cat's whiskers clearly obey the same basic laws of physics. Moving air can bend them. Their follicles contain mechanically sensitive receptors. Their facial nerves can carry information created by whisker movement. Researchers have not yet built an equally detailed body of experiments showing that cats use airflow to create a precise map of nearby furniture. Popular descriptions sometimes compare whiskers with radar. Radar sends energy outward and measures the signal that returns. A whisker performs no such broadcast. It receives mechanical forces already present in the nearby environment. Airflow may contribute useful clues about direction, movement, or a nearby opening. The exact detail a cat can extract from those clues remains difficult to measure. Preserving that uncertainty gives the whisker a more accurate kind of wonder. Its abilities arise from flexible keratin, sensitive follicles, moving air, and a nervous system prepared to detect very small changes. No hidden force is required. A current through a doorway may shift several whiskers before the cat steps forward. Air displaced by a passing object may create a brief vibration. The pattern could join information already arriving through hearing, smell, and vision. Once the moving object comes close enough to touch the whiskers directly, the signal becomes stronger and easier to connect with its position. That transition matters most when the object keeps changing direction. A feather skimming the floor, a small insect crossing the wall, or a toy turning beneath the muzzle can move from distant sight to near touch within a second. At that range, the whisker system becomes part of the cat's final control over something moving directly in front of the face. A feather toy slides across the floor several body lengths ahead of the cat. Its eyes follow the change in direction, while the ears turn toward the faint scrape of the toy against the surface. At that distance, vision and hearing provide most of the useful information. The cat can judge where the movement is heading, how quickly it is traveling, and when it pauses. As the distance closes, the sensory problem changes. The toy moves beneath the front of the face, where the nose and muzzle begin to block part of the view. A target that was clear from across the room can become partly hidden during the final approach. The cat lowers its head, brings the front paws closer, and angles the main whisker array forward. Several shafts may meet the toy as it passes beneath the nose. Contact on the left side creates a different pattern from contact on the right. A whisker that bends for only a moment can report a quick change in direction. Another shaft may remain pressed against the toy as it slows between the paws. These signals arrive while the object is still moving. The cat's task has shifted from locating something at a distance to following its exact position within the last few centimeters around the face. Touch becomes especially useful here because it begins at the place where the toy is physically meeting the body's sensory field. A small turn of the toy can bend a new whisker. Pressure can disappear from one follicle and appear in another. The sequence helps the nervous system update where the object has gone, even when the eyes cannot keep it fully in view. The whiskers work alongside several other sources of information. The paws feel pressure through the skin. Joints report the angle of each limb. Muscles provide feedback about how far the legs have moved. The jaw and neck contribute their own position signals as the head lowers or turns. Hearing continues to follow any rustle or tap, while scent may help identify the object at close range. This cooperation allows the cat to make small corrections during play or hunting. A paw can shift inward. The head can angle to one side. The whiskers can spread farther forward as the object moves beneath the muzzle. The final movement appears quick from the outside, yet it is supported by many streams of information arriving together. Some of the fastest examples of whisker-guided hunting come from a much smaller mammal. The Etruscan shrew is among the lightest mammals in the world, with many adults weighing less than 3 grams. Its body is only a few centimeters long, and its movements occur at remarkable speed. During active touch, an Etruscan shrew can sweep its whiskers at approximately 14 cycles each second. One cycle includes a forward movement and a return. Experiments have found that these shrews can react to movement from nearby prey within roughly 25 to 30 milliseconds. 30 milliseconds is 3/100ths of a second. That response is faster than a human blink and shows how quickly a mammalian whisker system can contribute to a close-range correction. Cats use a different strategy. They are far larger than Etruscan shrews, and they do not normally perform the same rapid, repeated whisking pattern. The shrew measurements reveal the speed possible in a specialized mammalian touch system, rather than the exact timing of a domestic cat. The shared principle still applies. When a moving target enters the space around the nose and paws, whisker contact can add information quickly enough to influence the movement already underway. This ability carried clear value for feline ancestors, pursuing small animals through grass, brush, rocky ground, and dim shelter. The final approach placed the target close to the mouth and beneath the clearest view of the eyes. Whiskers help cover that last narrow distance with touch. A modern toy uses the same body system, without the need for a real hunt. The feather turns beneath the muzzle. The facial whiskers meet it. The paws close around it, and the sensory task moves farther down the front legs. Near the wrist, another group of specialized hairs is positioned beside the space where the paws hold and examine what they have found. The toy shifts against the inside of one front leg as the cat steadies it between the paws. A few stiff hairs near the wrist bend with the movement. These are the carpal whiskers, named for the carpus, the group of small bones that forms the wrist region. They grow along the rear or inner side of the front leg, above the paw. Their position places them close to anything passing beneath the chest or held near the forelimbs. A feather caught between the paws may brush across them. The raised edge of a step can bend them as the leg reaches downward. A narrow surface may pass close to the wrist, while the paw searches for a secure place to land. The carpal whiskers extend touch slightly beyond the skin, just as the larger whiskers extend beyond the muzzle. They are genuine sinus hairs, seated within specialized follicles containing sensory nerve endings. Their smaller size and less obvious position have led to fewer studies than the large whisker rows beside the nose. One important experiment, published in 1973, examined how both facial and carpal sinus hairs send information into the nervous system. Researchers moved individual hairs on anesthetized cats under carefully controlled conditions. They recorded electrical activity from two sensory routes. The infraorbital nerve carries information from much of the muzzle and upper face. The ulnar nerve travels along the forelimb and carries sensation from regions near the outer side of the paw and wrist. By bending one sinus hair at a time, the researchers could compare the movement with the pattern produced in its nerve fibers. The responses fell into four broad groups. Two groups were slowly adapting. These fibers continued sending electrical pulses while the hair remained bent. Their activity changed in an orderly way as the amount of displacement increased. Displacement simply means how far the hair was moved from its resting position. A slight bend created one level of activity. Greater pressure shifted the shaft farther and produced a stronger or altered signal. This allowed the nerve to preserve information about the position of the hair during steady contact. The two remaining groups were rapidly adapting. They responded most strongly while the hair was moving. One group required a fairly quick movement before it reacted clearly. The other had a lower velocity threshold and could respond when the shaft changed position more slowly. A threshold is the minimum amount of stimulation needed to produce a reliable response. Several fibers also preferred particular directions. A carpal whisker, pushed toward the paw, could activate a receptor differently from the same hair moved toward the elbow. This directional pattern came from the arrangement of the receptor and the way the follicle tissue changed shape around it. Within one small patch of the foreleg, the nervous system could therefore receive information about how far a hair moved, which way it bent, how quickly the movement occurred, and whether the pressure remained. Those signals would join other feedback already arriving from the paw. Pressure-sensitive endings in the skin report contact with the floor or toy. Receptors around the joints provide information about limb angle. Sensory structures in muscles and tendons help the nervous system track tension and movement. The carpal whiskers add contact from just beyond the surface of the leg. Their exact role during ordinary feline behavior is still being studied. Their location makes it reasonable to think that they help when an object approaches the forelimb, when a paw reaches into a confined space, or when something moves close between the legs. The 1973 recordings confirm that these hairs can encode detailed movement. They do not show that the hairs serve only one purpose, such as controlling captured prey. A cat may use the same structures during play, climbing, stepping, and exploration. The main facial array receives information before an object reaches the nose. The carpal hairs continue that sensory coverage closer to the paws. Together, they allow contact to be sampled at more than one point along the front of the body. The toy can move from the whiskers beside the mouth into the space between the forelegs without leaving the cat's wider field of touch. At every follicle, mechanical pressure must still become electrical activity, capable of traveling beyond the local hair. From the muzzle, those impulses enter one of the major sensory pathways of the face and begin moving toward the brain. Pressure inside the whisker follicle changes the shape of a sensory nerve ending. Tiny channels in the cell membrane respond to that distortion. Charged particles begin moving across the membrane, changing its electrical balance. When the change becomes strong enough, the nerve cell produces an action potential. An action potential is a brief electrical pulse that travels along a nerve fiber. The pulse keeps its basic size as it moves. Information is carried through the timing and number of pulses, rather than through one signal growing larger, like water in a pipe. A stronger or faster whisker movement may cause a fiber to fire more often. A light bend may activate only some of the available receptors. Continued pressure can keep certain fibers active, while movement-sensitive fibers become quieter after the first change. Each receptor, therefore, contributes a slightly different part of the contact. Slowly adapting fibers preserve information, while the whisker remains displaced. Their activity can continue while the shaft rests against the side of a box. Rapidly adapting fibers respond most strongly when movement begins, ends, or changes speed. A brief tap may produce a short burst. Sliding contact can create a changing sequence as the whisker catches and releases against a textured surface. The nervous system receives these events as patterns spread across many fibers. For the large whiskers beside the muzzle, the signal enters branches of the trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal means three-part, referring to the three main branches that spread across the face. One branch serves the forehead and upper eye region. A second branch carries sensation from much of the upper jaw, cheek, nose, and whisker pad. The third reaches the lower jaw and nearby areas. Muzzle whisker signals travel mainly through the infraorbital nerve. Infraorbital means beneath the eye. This nerve belongs to the maxillary branch of the trigeminal system, the division serving the middle part of the face. Bundles of sensory fibers leave individual whisker follicles and join larger nerve branches beneath the skin. Those branches carry the electrical activity inward through openings in the skull. The original bend stays behind at the cheek, Its features continue as a code made from which fibers are active, when their pulses begin, and how quickly they repeat. A contact arriving from the left side of one follicle activates a different combination, from pressure arriving from below. A slow bend produces another timing pattern. Vibration adds rapid changes that can appear as tightly spaced bursts of nerve activity. The brain receives no tiny copy of the cardboard edge. It receives a changing electrical pattern shaped by the surface, the movement of the whisker, and the structure of the follicle. This kind of coding occurs throughout the sensory nervous system. The ears convert moving air into nerve signals. The eyes turn light into electrical activity. Whisker follicles perform the same broad task with touch, beginning with force against a flexible shaft. The first major destination for facial touch signals lies in the brainstem. The brainstem sits at the base of the brain and connects it with the spinal cord. Within it are groups of nerve cells called trigeminal sensory nuclei. A nucleus in this setting is a cluster of nerve cells performing related work. Cat experiments have traced signals from the large muzzle whiskers into these brainstem regions. Input from separate follicles enters in an organized pattern. The activity is transformed as it passes from the first sensory fibers to new groups of neurons. Some cells respond strongly to the start of movement. Others combine signals arriving over a longer period. Nearby whiskers can influence overlapping neural territories while still retaining information about where each contact began. This organization prevents the entire muzzle from becoming one undivided touch signal. A bend in a whisker near the nose does not enter the system exactly like contact with a longer shaft farther back on the cheek. The pathway preserves enough separation for the nervous system to compare locations across the array. From the brainstem, signals continue toward higher regions involved in touch, movement, and spatial awareness. Each stage can combine the whisker input with information about head position and muscle activity. That matters because the same bend can mean something different when the cat is turning, lowering its face, or moving forward. By this point, a light touch against cardboard has traveled from keratin to follicle, from receptor to nerve, and from the face into the brainstem. Its exact place of origin remains marked within the pattern. Deeper in the brain, that order becomes a map reflecting the arrangement of whiskers across the cat's face. From the brainstem, the signal rises toward regions of the brain that process touch. One of the most important lies in the outer layer of the brain, called the cerebral cortex. The cortex contains areas devoted to different kinds of information. Some regions respond strongly to vision. Others handle sound, movement, or touch from particular parts of the body. Within the touch system, the body is represented in an orderly way. Nearby areas of skin often send information into nearby areas of brain tissue. Scientists call this somatotopy. The word means that the body has a kind of arranged map inside the nervous system. The map does not look like a tiny cat. It is made from groups of neurons responding to signals from different places. The whiskers follow this same general rule. A follicle near the nose sends information into one neural territory. A longer whisker farther back on the cheek reaches a related area nearby. This arrangement helps preserve where a contact began. A study published in 1976 examined how cat whisker signals were represented in the cortex. Researchers recorded from individual units, meaning single neurons or small groups of neurons whose electrical activity could be measured. They found that the cortical whisker region was organized according to the position of the hairs on the face. About 39% of the units they sampled responded when only one sinus hair was moved. That level of selectivity means some neurons were closely tied to one particular whisker. A bend in that shaft could activate them strongly, while movement in a neighboring whisker produced little or no response. Other cortical neurons responded to several whiskers. Those broader responses allowed information from different parts of the array to be combined. This balance is useful. A neuron linked mainly to one follicle can preserve fine location. A neuron receiving several inputs can detect a pattern spreading across the face. Suppose the cat moves past the rounded edge of a box. The forward whiskers touch first. Contact then reaches longer shafts along the side of the muzzle. Inside the cortex, activity may shift through related groups of neurons in the same order. The brain receives a moving pattern that reflects both the shape of the object and the motion of the head. Another study, published in 1977, used very small controlled movements of individual cat whiskers. Each deflection measured about 100 micrometers. A micrometer is 1,000th of a millimeter. 100 micrometers is roughly the thickness of a sheet of paper. Even movements on that scale produce measurable responses in the cortex. The researchers identified at least 3 separate response locations connected with whisker input. Their exact positions varied somewhat from one cat to another. That variation shows that the overall plan can remain consistent, while the detailed boundaries differ between individuals. Rodents provide the most famous example of whisker maps in the brain. In rats and mice, the cortex contains distinct structures often called barrels. Each barrel is linked strongly with one major facial whisker. When viewed in prepared brain tissue, these structures form a clear pattern that resembles the arrangement of the whiskers on the muzzle. Cats organize whisker information differently. Researchers searched for the same kind of anatomical barrels in adult cats and did not find them. They also examined fetal kittens between 53 and 57 days of development. Those kittens showed no rodent-like barrel pattern either. The absence fits the different way cats use their whiskers. Rats repeatedly sweep the array across surfaces in rapid cycles. Cats position their whiskers more selectively, while moving the head and face. Their cortex still preserves location and combines signals, though the structure lacks the sharply divided barrel layout seen in rodents. The useful result remains the same at a broader level. Signals from individual follicles keep enough identity to mark a local touch. Connections among neurons allow several contacts to become one changing pattern. Head movement adds timing. Muscle feedback adds information about the angle of the face. Vision and hearing contribute details from farther away. The cat's sense of nearby space grows from all of these streams meeting inside the nervous system. The geometry visible on the muzzle has a corresponding order in the brain. That connection also appears on the outside. As attention shifts, the muscles move the whisker pads, and the changing array becomes part of the expression visible across the cat's face. A settled cat often holds its whiskers in loose curves beside the cheeks. The shafts point outward with little tension, following the natural shape of the muzzle. When something draws the cat's attention, the arrangement can change within a moment. A small object placed near the nose may bring the whiskers forward. Several rows can spread toward the source while the head leans closer. The same muscles that aim the sensory field also change the appearance of the face. Forward whiskers often accompany close inspection, play, or focused interest. The cat may be preparing the longest shafts to meet an object beneath the nose. Their new angle increases the chance of early contact. That visible shift has a practical sensory purpose, even though it may also tell an observer that the cat's attention has sharpened. A different pattern can appear when the face becomes tense. The whiskers may draw closer to the cheeks, lose some of their relaxed curve, or appear unusually straight. Discomfort and defensive behavior can both produce changes around the muzzle. The full meaning depends on what the rest of the body is doing. A cat leaning toward a toy with forward ears and an active tail presents a different picture from a cat holding its body low with the ears turned back. Whisker position works as one part of a larger expression. The eyes add information through pupil size and eyelid tension. Ear angle can show where attention is directed or whether the cat is preparing to withdraw. Head height, posture, movement, and breathing also change the scene. Even appetite and willingness to interact can matter when discomfort is a concern. One isolated facial feature rarely provides enough information by itself. Veterinary researchers have tried to make these observations more consistent. In 2019, a team developed the Feline Grimace Scale, a tool designed to help assess acute pain in cats through changes in facial appearance. The study included 35 client-owned cats experiencing naturally occurring acute pain and 20 control cats without the same painful conditions. Researchers identified 5 facial action units. These were ear position, narrowing around the eyes, tension in the muzzle, changes in the whiskers, and the position of the head. 4 observers scored 110 photographs using those features. The painful cats received higher total scores. After pain-relieving treatment, the scores generally fell. This showed that changes across the face could provide useful information when they were considered together. The whiskers contributed to the scale through visible shifts in their position and shape. A tense array might look straighter, more retracted, or less freely curved than it would during relaxed rest. Later work found that individual features around the muzzle and whiskers could be harder for observers to score consistently than the full combined scale. That result supports a careful approach. Whiskers can add information, though they work best alongside the ears, eyes, head, posture, and behavior. A cat's usual appearance also matters. Some cats naturally carry long whiskers that sweep widely to the sides. Others have shorter shafts, stronger curves, or uneven rows. Rex breeds may have curled or shortened whiskers because of inherited changes affecting hair structure. Age, face shape, and recent movement can also alter how the array looks. An observer gains more useful information by comparing the cat with its own familiar resting expression. A sudden change that continues across several behaviors deserves more attention than one brief movement during play or exploration. This kind of observation can remain calm and practical. Whiskers moving forward near a new object often reflect active investigation. A loose lateral curve commonly appears during rest. Retraction paired with tense posture may suggest that the cat feels guarded or uncomfortable. Persistent changes involving appetite, movement, or social behavior are something a veterinarian can help evaluate. The important lesson stays grounded in the body. Facial muscles position the whiskers for sensing, and those same movements become visible to anyone watching closely. The sensory system therefore contributes to expression, without turning the face into a simple code. One shaft can move because of curiosity, contact, muscle tension, or the cat's individual anatomy. Meaning emerges from the full pattern. Because the whiskers seem so closely tied to the living face, they can appear permanent. Each exposed shaft, however, belongs to a cycle of growth, rest, release, and replacement, while the sensitive follicle beneath the skin remains in place. A loose whisker resting on a blanket can look surprisingly complete. Its fine tip remains intact. The shaft still holds its curve, and the thicker end may appear slightly darker, where it once sat within the skin. Finding one like this is usually part of ordinary renewal. The visible whisker has finished its time in the follicle and has been released, while the living structure beneath the cheek remains capable of producing another. Hair follicles are sometimes described as mini organs because each one contains several kinds of living tissue working together. Cells near the base divide to build the growing shaft. Blood vessels deliver oxygen and nutrients. Connective tissue supports the follicle, while sensory nerves remain arranged around the specialized whisker capsule. The strand that eventually emerges from the skin is made from hardened keratin. Once outside the body, that shaft contains no living cells of its own. Growth continues from below as new material is added inside the follicle. The process follows a cycle rather than continuing at the same rate forever. During the active growth stage, cells near the root divide and add keratin to the base of the shaft. The whisker lengthens as older material is pushed outward. This stage can continue for a substantial period, allowing the shaft to reach far beyond the ordinary fur of the muzzle. Growth later slows as the follicle enters a transition stage. Cell division decreases, and the lower portion of the follicle begins to change shape. A resting period follows, during which the old shaft remains seated, even though active lengthening has stopped. Eventually, the connection loosens enough for the whisker to fall away. Normal movement can complete the release. A cat rubbing its cheek against furniture, grooming with a paw, or settling onto fabric may leave the old shaft behind without any sign of discomfort. The follicle can then return to active growth and begin producing a replacement. Every whisker does not pass through this cycle on the same schedule. One follicle may be growing a new shaft, while another holds a mature whisker in place. A third may be approaching the release stage. This staggered timing is called asynchronous growth. Asynchronous means that the follicles are working at different points in the cycle, rather than changing together. The arrangement helps preserve the overall sensory field. Losing one whisker has a much smaller effect than losing an entire row at once. Neighboring shafts continue extending into the surrounding space while the replacement grows. The new whisker begins short and gradually reaches its mature length. there is no single dependable timetable that applies to every cat. Growth rate can vary with the particular follicle, the cat's age, its general health, and how much of the shaft was lost. A whisker broken halfway along its length presents a different task from one that has been naturally shed from the root. The shortened shaft may remain in place until the normal cycle releases it. A fully shed whisker requires the follicle to build a new shaft from its base. Published estimates of regrowth time vary, so a precise promise of several weeks or a fixed number of months would be misleading. The gradual nature of the process is more important than the calendar. Whiskers can also bend or break during ordinary activity. A shaft may catch against a rough surface or become damaged through repeated rubbing. Curled whiskers can occur naturally in some cats, especially breeds whose coat hairs are also affected by inherited changes in hair structure. An occasional uneven shaft does not automatically signal a problem. The larger pattern gives better context. One loose whisker found now and then fits normal renewal. Several whiskers disappearing suddenly from matching areas on both sides of the face deserve more attention. Redness, swelling, crusting, or visible irritation around the follicles also falls outside simple shedding. A persistent change of that kind is something a veterinarian can help assess, without assuming one cause from appearance alone. The system is built around a useful division. The sensitive follicle is durable and protected beneath the skin. Its outer lever can be renewed after wear, breakage, or natural release. This allows the cat to maintain a working sensory array across years of grooming, exploration, and contact with the environment. Natural renewal changes the field gradually, usually one shaft at a time. Deliberately shortening many whiskers at once creates a much faster change, reducing their reach and altering the mechanics of the entire array before replacement growth can restore it. A full whisker array depends on the length and shape of each shaft. When scissors pass through the exposed portion, they cut hardened keratin. No nerve runs through that outer strand, so the cut itself does not slice living nerve tissue. The larger effect appears in the way the shortened whisker now moves. A long shaft can reach the edge of a box, the side of a chair, or a hand approaching the muzzle before the cheek arrives. Removing several centimeters reduces that early contact range. The object must come closer before the remaining shaft can bend. Length also changes leverage. A push near the tip of a full whisker acts across a longer distance from the follicle. That distance increases the turning effect at the base. A shorter shaft produces a different force from the same contact, because the point of pressure now sits closer to the cheek. The follicle still contains its blood-filled spaces and sensory endings. The mechanical message arriving there has changed. Stiffness changes as well. The thicker region near the base resists bending more strongly than the fine outer tip. Trimming removes the most tapered part and leaves a shorter, blunter structure. A touch that once created a broad, smooth curve may now produce a smaller movement. Vibrations traveling down the shaft also depend on its remaining length and shape. Mechanical models of whiskers show that 4 features strongly affect the signal at the base: length, natural curve, taper, and base diameter. Artificial whiskers built for robots follow the same physical rules. A flexible rod attached to a sensor produces different measurements after its length or shape is altered. The sensor at the base may still work perfectly, while the shortened rod gathers a changed version of the outside contact. A cat with trimmed whiskers still has sight, hearing, smell, paw sensation, and memory. It can continue walking, eating, grooming, and resting. Claims that trimming leaves every cat completely unable to function go beyond the evidence. Strong controlled studies comparing domestic cats before and after whisker trimming remain limited. The established anatomy still gives a clear reason to leave healthy whiskers alone. They are working parts of a touch system, and shortening them changes their reach and mechanics until they grow back. Individual cats may respond differently. A confident cat in a familiar home may show little obvious change. A cat moving through a new room, a narrow carrier, or a dim passage may rely more heavily on close-range touch. Subtle effects can also be difficult for a person to notice. A slightly wider turn around furniture or a more cautious approach to an opening may blend into normal variation. The absence of dramatic behavior does not restore the information removed from the shortened shaft. Plucking creates a more direct injury risk. A whisker follicle sits much deeper than an ordinary coat hair root and contains dense sensory connections. Pulling the shaft from that structure applies force to living tissue. The follicle can be painful, irritated, or damaged. Cutting and plucking therefore affect the cat in different ways. Cutting changes the external lever without directly pulling on the root. Plucking disturbs the sensitive structure beneath the skin. Both practices offer no benefit to a healthy cat. The trimmed shaft cannot repair its missing tip. Keratin outside the skin has no living cells capable of rebuilding the cut end. Normal growth must continue from within the follicle until the whisker is gradually replaced or restored to length. That process may take weeks or months, depending on the follicle and how much was removed. During that time, the shape of the sensory field remains altered. Leaving whiskers intact is a simple form of care. It respects a structure already shaped for the cat's face, movement, and daily surroundings. The same whiskers that reach toward a tunnel wall also meet harmless household objects many times each day. Their contact with the sides of food and water dishes has led to a popular idea known as whisker fatigue, where an ordinary feeding bowl is said to overwhelm this sensitive system. A cat approaching a food dish may bring several whiskers into contact with the rim before its mouth reaches the food. The longest shafts can bend backward as the head lowers. With each bite, the array may brush the same sides again. This familiar scene has led to a popular idea called whisker fatigue, sometimes also described as whisker stress. The claim suggests that repeated contact with a narrow bowl overwhelms the sensitive follicles and makes eating unpleasant. After seeing how many nerves and receptor endings surround each major whisker, the explanation can sound reasonable. A flexible shaft transfers pressure into a deeply innervated follicle. Several whiskers touching a rim at once create repeated sensory signals. A cat may also pull food onto the floor, pause beside the dish, or leave pieces around the edges. Those observations are real. Their cause is harder to identify from behavior alone. A cat can move food for many reasons. The center of a deep bowl may be harder to reach than the edges. Wet food can stick to one side. A dish may slide, carry an unfamiliar smell, or sit in a noisy location. Dental discomfort, nausea, stress, and changes in appetite can also affect how a cat eats. The whiskers may contribute in some cases, though the visible behavior does not reveal that cause by itself. A controlled study published in 2020 tested the bowl idea directly. Cats first ate from their usual dishes. They were also offered a commercially marketed whisker-friendly dish designed to reduce contact around the sides of the face. Researchers measured practical outcomes rather than relying only on owner impressions. They recorded how long the cat spent eating, how much food they consumed, and how much they dropped outside the dish. Across the group, the wider alternative did not produce significant improvements in those main measures. The cats did not consistently eat for longer. Their overall intake did not rise in a clear group-wide pattern. Food dropping also remained broadly similar. These results weakened the stronger version of the claim, especially the idea that ordinary bowl contact reliably creates enough distress to disrupt feeding in most cats. Individual preference told a more varied story. Some cats appeared to favor the whisker-friendly dish when given a choice. That preference may have involved whisker contact. Several other features changed at the same time, making one cause difficult to isolate. A wider dish alters the angle of the head and neck. Shallow sides change how easily the mouth reaches food near the rim. The material may carry a different smell or feel cooler against the nose. Cleanliness, food position, stability, and previous experience can also shape which bowl a cat chooses. Habit matters as well. A cat that has eaten from one dish for years may continue choosing it because the location and routine are familiar. Another cat may quickly prefer a flat plate because food remains easier to reach across its surface. Both choices can be genuine without proving that one bowl causes neurological fatigue. The word fatigue also creates a specific impression. In ordinary speech, fatigue suggests that a system becomes tired after repeated use. Sensory nerves can adapt to steady stimulation, meaning their firing changes while a stimulus continues. That established process does not show that touching a bowl rim makes the whisker system exhausted or painful. A plausible mechanism still needs behavioral evidence strong enough to connect the mechanism with the claimed experience. Offering a wide, shallow bowl remains a simple and reasonable option. It may suit an individual cat's face, posture, or eating style. A plate with low edges can also make wet food easier to reach. The useful approach is to observe the cat's full behavior, rather than assume that every pause, spill, or unfinished meal begins with the whiskers. A sudden or serious reduction in eating deserves wider attention. Persistent appetite changes can be linked with dental disease, digestive illness, pain, stress, or other health concerns that a veterinarian can help evaluate. Changing the dish may improve comfort for some cats, though it should not delay that assessment when the change is marked or continues. The bowl debate shows how easily a sensitive structure can attract an explanation larger than the evidence supporting it. Whiskers deserve respect because their anatomy and sensory role are well established. Their everyday contact with household objects can vary in importance from one cat to another. The same basic structure becomes easier to understand when it is viewed beyond the kitchen, across mammals that have adapted whiskers for burrows, rocky passages, open water, and life in darkness. Across the mammal family, Whiskers appear in many forms, while keeping the same basic structure. A flexible shaft extends beyond the body and enters a specialized follicle beneath the skin. Sensory nerves surround the buried base. Muscles may adjust the whisker's position, and the brain interprets the movement that follows contact. This design is found in most therian mammals. Therian mammals are the large group that includes both placental mammals, such as cats and mice, and marsupials, such as kangaroos and opossums. Humans and the other great apes have lost the prominent, movable facial arrays found in many smaller mammals. A human face still grows hairs, yet those hairs lack the long shafts, specialized follicles, and organized movement system seen on a cat's muzzle. Mice show how far the basic design can be pushed toward active scanning. During close exploration, a mouse may sweep its whiskers forward and backward at rates approaching 25 Hz. 1 Hz means 1 cycle each second. At 25 Hz, the array completes about 25 forward and back movements in a single second. The whiskers repeatedly contact walls, gaps, and objects, while the mouse adjusts the angle of its head. Each sweep produces a fresh pattern of pressure across the follicles. Cats use a slower and less rhythmic strategy. Their main whiskers can move forward, spread outward, or draw closer to the cheeks, though they do not usually scan a surface through the rapid, repeated cycles common in mice and rats. The shared organ remains useful under a different movement plan. In water, the same broad design has been reshaped again. Seals carry thick facial whiskers supplied by dense networks of sensory nerves. Many seal whiskers have a wavy surface rather than the smoother curve seen in cats. That shape can reduce the vibration created by the seal's own movement through water. Once the animal passes through a current, the whiskers can respond to disturbances left behind by another moving body. These disturbances are called hydrodynamic trails. Hydrodynamic simply refers to the movement of water. A swimming fish leaves small changes in flow that can continue for a short time after the fish has passed. Controlled experiments have shown that harbor seals can follow such trails even when vision and hearing provide little useful guidance. The seal does not receive a picture of the fish. Its whiskers bend in the changing current, and the nervous system uses that pattern to guide movement through the water. A very different arrangement appears in hyraxes. These compact mammals live across parts of Africa and the Middle East, often among rocky slopes and narrow crevices. Their closest living relatives include elephants and sea cows, despite their much smaller size and rounded appearance. Researchers have confirmed that true vibrissae grow across large areas of the hyrax body. Long tactile hairs can appear along the back, sides, and limbs as well as around the face. This body-wide arrangement may help a hyrax detect nearby rock, while moving through passages where vision offers only part of the needed information. A surface can touch one of these hairs before pressing directly against the skin. The basic sensory plan has therefore been expanded from a facial array into a much broader field. Evolution modifies successful structures according to the problem an animal faces. Whisker length can change. Follicles may become more densely supplied with nerves. Muscles can produce rapid sweeping or slower positioning. The hairs may remain concentrated around the muzzle or spread across much of the body. Water, darkness, rocky shelter, and close hunting each favor different versions of the same mechanical idea. The domestic cat carries a combination suited to its own history. Mobile facial whiskers support close-range predatory movements. Long shafts contact the walls of confined spaces before the cheek arrives. Mechanical sensing remains available when light is low, and visual detail near the nose becomes limited. Carpal whiskers extend part of that touch system toward the front legs. A cat does not need the rapid whisking of a mouse or the wake-tracking ability of a seal for its own array to matter. Its whiskers fit the movements, body size, and surroundings of a small feline predator. The familiar lines beside the nose are one branch of a sensory design spread across much of mammal life. That wide distribution points to an origin far older than domestic cats, modern seals, or the first rodents. Whisker shafts almost never survive as fossils, so their earliest history must be traced through the bones and nerve passages hidden inside ancient skulls. The earliest whiskers left almost no direct trace in stone. Keratin breaks down quickly after death, and soft facial tissues usually disappear long before bones become fossils. A hair pressed into mud may leave a faint mark under rare conditions, though a complete whisker from more than 200 million years ago would be an extraordinary discovery. Researchers therefore look inside ancient skulls for evidence of the nerves and blood vessels that once supplied the face. Bone can preserve the routes those tissues followed. Small openings near the snout may lead into canals running through the upper jaw. Their shape, length, and branching pattern can reveal how a long-vanished animal's face was supplied. In modern cats, an important passage beneath the eye carries the infraorbital nerve. This nerve serves the upper lip, nose, cheek, and the sensitive follicles surrounding the main muzzle whiskers. The name infraorbital simply means beneath the eye socket. A larger and more organized nerve supply can leave a more distinct canal through the bone. In 2016, researchers used computed tomography to study this feature in 29 fossil skulls. Computed tomography, often shortened to a CT scan, uses X-rays to build detailed images of structures hidden inside solid material. The method allowed the team to follow tiny internal passages without cutting apart rare fossils. The skulls belong to therapsids and cynodonts, groups positioned along the long evolutionary route toward mammals. Therapsids included many animals with a mixture of reptile-like and mammal-like features. Cynodonts were a more specialized branch, whose later members developed increasingly mammalian jaws, teeth, hearing structures, and patterns of growth. Among the more advanced cynodonts were animals known as prosostrodontians. They were still outside the group containing true mammals, though several parts of their skulls had already begun to resemble the mammalian condition. Their infraorbital canal had shifted backward and become fully enclosed by bone. It also showed fewer branches than the open, spreading grooves seen in several earlier relatives. That change suggests that the tissues passing through it had become concentrated into a more organized route toward the front of the face. Living mammals use this same region to carry the nerve fibers that serve a mobile upper lip and sensitive muzzle. The fossil anatomy therefore fits a face capable of finer movement and richer touch. Researchers connected the enclosed canal with the likely presence of maxillary vibrissae, meaning whiskers growing from the upper jaw region around the snout. They also linked it with a mobile rhinarium. The rhinarium is the flexible, often moist surface around the nostrils in animals such as cats and dogs. Greater movement in this area would have allowed an animal to shift the nose, lips, and nearby tactile hairs while exploring its surroundings. The estimated transition occurred roughly 240 to 246 million years ago, during the Triassic period. That places the probable origin of a strongly whisker-supported face more than 170 million years before the earliest true cats. It also came long before the mass extinction that ended the age of the non-bird dinosaurs 66 million years ago. No fossil from the study preserved a whisker attached to the cheek. The conclusion comes from comparison. Ancient canals were matched with the anatomy of living mammals, where scientists can trace the nerve directly from the skull opening to the muzzle and follicles. This kind of reasoning is common in paleontology, the study of ancient life. Muscles leave attachment marks. Blood vessels pass through small holes. Nerves travel along protected channels. Each hard structure can preserve part of a soft tissue system after the soft tissue itself has vanished. The timing also fits a major change in mammalian ancestry. Many early mammal relatives were becoming smaller and more active during dim parts of the day. A sensitive face would have helped them investigate burrows, narrow shelter, vegetation, and uneven ground when vision provided less detail. Whiskers could gather touch before the nose met an obstacle and remain useful in complete darkness. The cat resting in a modern home carries a later version of that ancient arrangement. Its face has been shaped by millions of generations separating a Triassic cynodont from a domestic feline. The basic mechanical idea has endured. A flexible shaft outside the body, a protected sensor beneath the skin, and a nerve root carrying contact into the brain. Its efficiency has attracted another kind of attention. Engineers now build artificial whiskers for machines that must feel their way through darkness, dust, narrow spaces, or water, where cameras provide an incomplete view. A small robot enters a dark tunnel with no clear view of the walls ahead. Around its body, thin, flexible rods extend outward in a circular pattern. As one rod touches stone, it bends slightly. Sensors hidden at the base record the force created by that contact. The design follows the same broad principle found in a cat's face. A simple shaft reaches into the environment. The sensitive parts remain protected where the shaft is attached. Engineers call these devices artificial whiskers. They may be made from plastic, metal, carbon fiber, or other flexible materials. Some are straight. Others are tapered or curved to imitate the shape of biological whiskers. Their purpose is to gather information through gentle physical contact. A camera can struggle in darkness, dust, smoke, or muddy water. A flexible whisker can still touch a nearby surface under those conditions. Because the shaft bends rather than striking rigidly, it can explore without applying much force. The difficult part begins after contact. A sensor at the base records a mechanical change, but that signal does not immediately reveal the exact point where the whisker touched the object. The same amount of bending can sometimes be produced in several ways. A light push near the tip may resemble a stronger push closer to the base. A curved whisker can twist as well as bend. Movement of the robot adds another layer, because the shaft may already be changing position before it meets the surface. Engineers measure several kinds of information to solve this problem. Some systems record force, which describes a push or pull. Others measure a moment, the turning effect created around the anchored base. Strain sensors detect tiny changes in the material as it bends. Magnetic or optical systems can track movement near the attachment point. Certain whiskers produce an electrical change directly when the shaft deforms. Under ideal conditions, 6 measurements at the base can describe a contact in 3-dimensional space. These include force along 3 directions and turning force around 3 axes. An axis is an imagined line used to describe direction and rotation. When all 6 components are known, mathematical models can estimate where the whisker touched the surface. The calculation also requires accurate knowledge of the shaft's length, curve, taper, and stiffness. Arrays improve the result. One contact may leave several possible explanations. A second whisker touching nearby narrows them. The known movement of the robot helps narrow them further. This resembles the cat's sensory field, where the brain compares signals from several follicles, while also receiving information about head motion. In 2024, engineers described an underground mapping system built with 32 artificial whiskers arranged around a circular frame. As the device moved through a confined space, the rods contacted nearby surfaces from several directions. The combined signals helped estimate the shape of the surrounding tunnel. Other robotic whisker systems have guided machines around obstacles, built local maps, and traced the contours of 3-dimensional objects. A robot can slide past a wall and use repeated contacts to follow its curve. Another design can move a whisker across an object and reconstruct part of its surface from the changing forces at the base. These machines remain simpler than a living cat. A biological follicle contains blood-filled spaces, several receptor types, muscles, and nerve fibers. Its signals pass through an organized nervous system that also knows how the head and body are moving. The cat can alter the whisker angle before contact and change its behavior immediately afterward. Engineers must recreate each part through separate materials, sensors, motors, and computer code. That challenge reveals why the original design has lasted so long. The exposed shaft is light enough to respond to faint contact. Its flexibility allows safe movement around delicate objects. The sensing tissue remains protected inside the body, where wear and damage are less likely. A single part can gather information about direction, pressure, movement, and vibration. Understanding an artificial whisker also shows why no single piece explains the cat's ability. The shaft shapes the force. The follicle detects the result. Nerves carry the pattern into the brain, where it is compared with signals from neighboring whiskers and the cat's own movement. The full function appears only when those parts work as one continuous system. That same loop has been present throughout the journey, beginning with one whisker brushing the edge of a cushion and ending with the body adjusting to what the whisker found. The machine fades from view, and the familiar cat returns to the cushion where this journey began. One long whisker rests over the edge, its fine tip suspended just beyond the fabric. From the outside, it still looks like a simple curved hair. Its full path now reaches much farther than the eye can follow. The shaft narrows toward the tip and thickens as it approaches the cheek. That changing shape determines how easily each part bends and how force travels toward the base. A faint touch near the tip gains leverage across the whisker's length. Contact closer to the face creates a different mechanical pattern. Natural curve, thickness, and direction all help shape the message before a nerve becomes active. When the cushion presses upward, the buried portion shifts inside the follicle sinus complex. Connective tissue stretches around it. Pressure changes within the blood-filled spaces. Sensory endings positioned at several depths experience different parts of that deformation. Movement-sensitive receptors respond strongly as contact begins or changes. Other receptors continue firing while the whisker remains bent. Together, they preserve information about direction, speed, pressure, and duration. Electrical impulses then travel away from the follicle through sensory fibers. For the main muzzle whiskers, those fibers join the infraorbital branch of the trigeminal nerve. The pattern reaches the brainstem and continues toward higher regions that process touch. Some neurons remain closely linked with one particular whisker. Others combine signals arriving from several points across the array. The brain can therefore preserve the location of a small contact, while also following a pattern moving across the face. Muscles around the muzzle add another part of the process. The cat can angle its whiskers forward toward a close object, or let them settle more loosely beside the cheeks. Changing the position of the array changes which shaft touches first. That contact alters nerve activity, and the new information can guide a turn of the head or a change in pace. Fresh movement creates a different contact a moment later. The system continues as a loop between the surrounding space and the moving body. Vision may first locate a toy across the room. Hearing can follow its movement along the floor. Smell becomes more useful as the cat draws near. Whisker contact takes over part of the task when the object enters the final space beneath the muzzle. Every sense contributes information in its own form and at its most useful distance. Whiskers work through physical force rather than through the signals used by radar. They gather no perfect image of a doorway and provide no magical awareness of every object nearby. Their real ability is more precise. They bring early touch information to the nervous system before a surface reaches the nose, eye, cheek, or front leg. A chair edge can bend one shaft before the head arrives. A moving toy can pass from vision into touch as it slips beneath the face. Airflow may add small mechanical cues, although the exact detail cats gain from those movements remains uncertain. The strength of the system comes from several ordinary biological parts working together. A replaceable keratin shaft reaches outward. The sensitive follicle stays protected beneath the skin. Nerves carry changing patterns into an organized brain. Movement then reshapes the contact and begins the process again. Versions of this arrangement appear across much of mammal life. Mice sweep their whiskers rapidly across nearby surfaces. Seals read disturbances moving through water. Hyraxes carry tactile hairs far beyond the face. Fossil skulls suggest that sensitive whisker-bearing snouts may have begun developing in mammal relatives during the Triassic, roughly 240 million years ago. The cat beside the cushion carries one modern form of that long inheritance. Its whiskers suit a small predator that often works close to the ground, explores narrow shelter, and remains active when visual detail becomes weaker. The same design now guides engineers building flexible sensors for robots moving through darkness or confined spaces. One of the oldest mammalian solutions continues to offer useful ideas because its structure is simple, protected, and responsive. As the cat settles more deeply, the muscles around the muzzle relax. The whiskers return to their natural outward curves. A nearby movement could bend one at any moment, beginning the passage from shaft to follicle, from nerve to brain, and back into motion. For now, the face remains still. The eyes are closed, and the whiskers rest just beyond the edge of the cat, holding the nearest part of the room within quiet reach.